Hello, and welcome back to The Give and Go. I'm your co-host, Reynoso, here with my boy.
Soltero. What's up, guys?
Let's do European football today.
Sure.
Let's do European football as the European footballing season has begun. And specifically in the Champions Leagues, I want to focus in on these top teams as well as the, mid-level teams that are competing for that prestigious trophy. We got our first look at a bunch of these squads facing off against each other and kind of seeing how they're all shaping out to be this Champions League season. I'm going to just come straight to you with some facts right off the bat. My biggest takeaway from watching these games this week is that there's probably just two tiers to how I see Champions League contenders this year.
Okay.
In the first tier, I have Manchester City.
Yeah.
And that's it. No other squad joins them. None even come close. In the second tier, I have Barcelona. I have Real Madrid. I have Arsenal. And I have Bayern Munich. PSG, we'll see if they get in the conversation. Inter Milan, we see if they get in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
But as of right now, bro, I think this Champions League season is shaping out to be one of the most clear seasons we've had in years, where the discrepancy between the level and talent of these teams is very clearly separated by a gap that's fully controlled by Manchester City. And they showed it this first week.
Yeah, man. I just read an article literally yesterday. I can't remember the source, so I really do apologize. But basically what it was saying is that the predictability of the Champions League has never been higher. And after reading it, I had already gone into the article kind of thinking that. And after reading, I was like, they're right. There was a time, even 10 years ago, 2013, 2014, where there was some sort of energy in the air where you're like, technically anybody could win it, even though you knew deep down that wasn't fully true. But I remember seeing teams like Apoel, a team from Cyprus, being somewhat competitive, and that was the lowest of the low that it got. So imagine all of the mid teams like a Real Sociedad at the time. There was always some sort of hope that, they could make a deep run. I think case in point was Dortmund at the time, doing really well with Klopp in the domestic league, but they were able to translate that to the actual Champions League. And then look at a team like Malaga, headed by a very young Isco at the time. Their form in Spain was so hot that it translated to European success, nearly making a semifinal appearance. Absolutely ridiculous when you look at that Malaga team at the time. And then, of course, you can look at the Benficas or the Portos at the time who were trying to be as competitive as they could. But nowadays, man, I can't consider any team that isn't named Manchester City. And I'm barely considering teams like Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Real Madrid. It is literally like that. I'm really glad that you tiered them this way, because I want to make this very clear. The way that I'm approaching this year's Champions League is very business-like. For me, I'm just looking at who can actually contend against Manchester City. That's how I'm approaching it. So, when I look at Newcastle, Milan, when I look at Lazio, Atletico, I'm not really looking to see who beats who. I'm looking to see who has the makings of potentially...
You're going big picture.
I'm going big picture. Who has the makings to potentially beat Manchester City in a knockout stage scenario? There's a lot to learn from. It still is very early on in the season, bro. We're only a month and a half in to this domestic football season. So there's a lot to learn, but also a lot left to be said. That's also another thing to say. But, man, just the way I see it, it's Man City and literally everybody else.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, man, because when you think about even recent, magical teams that we've had, like Ajax or Monaco, led by Kylian Mbappe, this feels like one of those years where I really don't see a mid-level team just rise to prominence like that in the way that Monaco and Ajax did those few years back. There's a squad like Real Sociedad who can maybe do something special, but even then I think they're limited because the gap is so big. The Portuguese teams, Porto and Benfica, even this year I don't see them topping what they were able to do last year with Benfica going all the way to the quarterfinals and playing well up until that point and flaming out. I don't know if I see a repeat of that. I do think this is a big picture scenario that we got to focus on, and there's a couple teams. There's a couple out of the second tier that I presented that I think as of right now could pose to provide a very competitive match against Manchester City.
For sure.
And the first team that I want to bring up that could potentially be that squad to face off against them is Arsenal.
Yeah.
Arsenal.
Yeah.
Going up against PSV Eindhoven and winning 4-0, bro. 4-0 in their first game back in the Champions League after years of missing out on this tournament. and just coming out and scoring in all sorts of fashion. 4 different goal scorers. That's what's surprising about this result. 4 different goal scorers on the score sheet with Gabriel Jesus, Trossard, and Saka getting in there as well. It's just a continuation of how we've already projected Arsenal to perform this season. Their offense is as fluid as it's ever been, and their ability to just dissect an opponent apart through these utilizations of different type of offensive weapons, with Gabriel Jesus dribbling his way through these really tight gaps and then feeding the ball out, and Odegaard being so smart, absolutely deadly from outside the box. Saka, an absolute killer on the wings. And then a guy like Trossard, who right now is rising to prominence over Martinelli specifically, and is just so clinical in front of goal and so smart as well. Arsenal, to me, really stood out in this first match week as a team that could potentially, in the grand scheme of this tournament, challenge Manchester City.
Absolutely. I don't even have much to add to that analysis because everything that you just said player profile wise is exactly what happened on that night in London against PSV, man. This was a vintage modern Arsenal performance, if that makes any sense. If you've seen Arsenal play over the last 2 years, then you know exactly what you saw against PSV in this Champions League night. It was perfection offensively, the most fluid an offense can truly get, and it was just beautiful to see. And again, the key for me, Gabriel Jesus, just the amount of chaos that he can create, and then when he gets the ball at the halfway mark, you think he's far from goal, but he's still going to be just as deadly. Turns your ass in a split second, drives, lays off the ball to Bukayo Saka, and then he can give it to Martin Odegaard. He can give it to Leandro Trossard. There's so much offensive class in this Arsenal side. 4-0 just really shouldn't surprise you against, unfortunately, just an unprepared PSV team. But yeah, Arsenal look absolutely incredible, and going forward for them in this Champions League campaign, I think starting with a 4-0 win is exactly what they needed to do. After not having been in the Champions League for like 6 years, I believe, what a way to come back. Truly, truly. And for Saka to get that first goal too, it just makes sense. Like, he's been like the core of what this Arsenal team is all about. Pace, dribble penetration, but also having the ruthlessness in front of goal. So brilliant to see, man. And it's good to see Arsenal play already at a very high level in Champions League because, again, if they can continue this, I do see them as true contenders against Manchester City. And I think what even helps them a little bit more is that they are in the same league, obviously. Yeah. But I think that helps because, you know, like I remember, 10 years ago when Barcelona and Real Madrid would play each other, Barca, for some reason, always had just a little bit of an edge, but, just domestically. And maybe Arsenal, maybe they can find an edge at the European level. Yeah. Maybe they can't win the Prem for some reason, but maybe they can find their solace in the European level. And that'd be crazy to see.
Imagine that? Yeah.
I know.
That'd be a crazy scenario where they actually knock out Manchester City on their quest to defend their trophy. That'd be ridiculous, but then you see Manchester City win it at the domestic level. It'd have all the makings for a classic rivalry of Premier League football. So then I don't want to get biblical on this podcast, but it does seem to me that when it comes to Arsenal, the key to them is believing in one guy and one guy only. At the end of the day, Jesus is the Savior.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I said it, dude, before the beginning of the season. Without Jesus, Arsenal will not accomplish anything this season. And it's crazy how instrumental and crucial he is to this offensive pieces, especially when you already have Odegaard, Trossard, Martinelli, and Saka. But Jesus is the glue.
Yeah.
And without him, I don't think he can connect the right to left. No. So, yeah, I mean, we every time he's on the pitch, Jesus does something absolutely spectacular. We saw it again against PSV. Like, Arsenal need him. And for me, it's very, very clear. Also, just another thing, another savior, if you will. I really do think Arteta's got this side just so well drilled. I talked about it in the build-up to this season. Last year, maybe it was a perfect dress rehearsal for Arsenal to really be like, all right, we're here, we're playing good football. But I think this season, Arteta can truly do something. I don't know what it is, man. But with the experience that they gained last year, if they can just build off of that with a guy like Arteta at the helm, I think they can do something really, really cool, man. So, yeah, honestly, I'm going for Arsenal this year in the Champions League, bro. Yeah. I'm just going for them. Just the way that they play football. I've always been a fan. Dude, I love loving it.
The final is at Wembley Stadium.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, dude. It's an incredible venue. Can you imagine a Man City Arsenal final at Wembley?
That'd be nuts, dude.
It'd be so perfect.
That'd be crazy.
Give me an all-English final for this one, man, given that it's going to be in one of the biggest stadiums, if not the biggest one in England.
Please be on the other side of the brackets.
Yeah.
Please,
honestly, man.
Oh, God.
Because as for these other Premier League teams, I don't know if I see it for them in terms of success in the Champions League. More specifically, Manchester United losing out to a contender, Bayern Munich, 4-3 at the Allianz Arena. The Musiala show, doing absolutely incredible in this game. Insane dribble penetration, insane decision making. So talented, so young, and so clinical as well. Getting a couple of, I think, one assist in this game. And did he get a goal? I think he just got an assist, but beyond that, he was so active offensively.
Got a really good assist, yeah.
And a continuation of Manchester United's issues. They've shown it ever since the beginning of the season. Yeah. We don't really need to harp on this once again. Barely beating out a Wolves team to start off the season, and then after that, losing to Tottenham and getting these really mediocre results. They enter the biggest stage in the Champions League against one of the toughest teams, and they ultimately just get dominated. Despite the scoreline being 4-3, I think it's ultimately very favorable towards Manchester United and how they performed in this game. This was a 2-goal difference type of game for me, in which they were never truly close to amassing. And all in all, I think Bayern didn't start off in their best form or shape, but they showed that when they focus and when they really want it, they can get that goal to take the lead. They can put an opponent out before they can get feisty and get back into the game. And the fact that they're able to take care of business at home, despite them not really playing up to 100%, I think says a lot about this Bayern team.
Yeah, the scoreline absolutely flattered Man U. 4-3 does them wonders, honestly. Like, you see that result and you're actually like, oh, we played against Bayern. We did good. But realistically, no. Ultimately, especially in that second half, got completely dominated with Bayern's offense, as you already mentioned. But I really want to double down on this. The dribble penetration that Bayern have on display is truly amazing to watch. When you have a guy like Jamal Musiala, Leroy Sané, Alphonso Davies as a fullback, maybe Coman off the bench, whatever you want, Gnabry, and then Harry Kane with the amount of technique that he has, not that he's a dribble penetrator, but just his skill on the ball. It's absolutely fantastic, and Bayern can be truly ruthless in front of goal when they're on it. But that's my problem with Bayern right now is I can't exactly pinpoint it, but Bayern is missing something. And all I can really say is just their robotic ruthlessness that they once possessed. I think when I think about those Bayern teams that won Champions Leagues not too long ago, they would have killed this Man U team 4-0. Even though they put their foot off of the pedal once they had like a 2-goal lead, which is very understandable, old Bayern would not have let Man U get some cheap goals. It was a little bit unlucky when you look at Bayern and how they conceded them, but that's the thing. Old Bayern just wouldn't have let that happen. They would have absolutely murdered this Man U team. And ultimately, that's really all I can say as to why Bayern won't win the Champions League this year. I really do think having that type of energy about Bayern is almost a trademark to them. And the fact that they just still haven't been able to re-find it, I do think is actually somewhat of a problem. It's the whole reason why Dortmund almost won the league last year. Mm-hmm. Because when Bayern were really good, they killed you 5-0. But Bayern would then go the next week and get a weird 2-2 draw. And so that weirdness that was there, very present last year for Bayern, I think is still just slightly here now. Now, here's the thing. As I said at the beginning, it's early. I actually could see this Bayern team getting weird of that weirdness and come February, March, April, being a very well-oiled machine that we're used to seeing Bayern play at, right? I actually could see that. But right now, I do think Bayern just are missing a bit of ruthlessness to their game.
Yeah, that ruthlessness is so... It's historic because I saw a stat that blew my mind. I was not aware this was happening, but... The last time Bayern lost a Champions League group stage game was 2017. Since then, they've got 32 wins and 3 draws with a 111-26 goal difference. All of that happening against opponents like PSG, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Manchester United, Ajax, Tottenham. It's absolutely mental. It's ridiculous. It's insane what they've been able to achieve just in their history in the Champions League. But I agree, that ruthlessness, I don't know if it's the the absence of, a prime Thomas Muller that is so known for having that trade. Or even when they had Leva, he was never questionable in front of goal the way that we've seen Bayern prior to Harry Kane, the way that we saw Bayern act, especially last year. A lot of people have been harping about the defensive midfield for Bayern, specifically the pairing midfielder alongside Kimmich. Kimmich is amazing, but Goretzka, I've heard a lot of criticisms toward his game, how he can be a little lackluster in the back and can oftentimes have really weird decision-making as well as just turning over the ball a little too much for a team of Bayern's stature. So maybe it's there that it's maybe there where that gap needs to be filled. Who knows? Ultimately, I think it's just a question of keeping up with this team until January, February to see how they pan out and what they can do once it gets really, really serious. Because even though Dortmund got really close, Bayern knew how to turn up and how to just turn that mental advantage they have over them to then lead them on to win the title. So I want to see if they do in the Champions League. But beyond that, I have a more interesting question here because I've tried to attach a fun question to every single one of these matchups. Something I was wondering about Bayern specifically, since they are tailored as a potential Manchester City challenger, is where would Bayern Munich be if they play in the Premier League? What place would they end in?
Oh, wow. I honestly think Manchester City and Arsenal right now are better than them. I truly do. So for me, I'm not even thinking top two for Bayern.
Okay.
I think this could change easily next year because I think Bayern are building to something. That's the thing. Especially if they can keep Tuchel on as an actual manager and not have any sort of drama there. I do think Bayern can build to something. But right now, I would probably say third place. If Liverpool are as good as they look, then I actually might even put Bayern fourth. Yeah.
Okay. This is a tough one, man. I think I would go. I would go third. I really do wonder how they would react to competing against top 6, top 8 Premier League sides consistently. I wonder what kind of toll that would take because right now I almost feel like they're so fresh facing off against these English sides because they rarely face them. I wonder how it would affect the team having to go, grueling games week in, week out in England and just going through that rough schedule that an English team has to go through. Ultimately, it's a fun question, and I do agree. At the very end of the day, I do see them in the top 4 of the Premier League.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? This is probably the first year since, I really started watching football in which Atleti's in the Champions League and my team, Liverpool, isn't. So, here I am having to hear about your Champions League experience. Shit fucking sucks, dude. I don't like missing out on the Champions League.
I think I'd rather be in the Europa League right now, man. I'm not gonna
For
lie.
Atleti?
Yeah.
It'd be way different.
It'd be so different. I'd actually have a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
I mean, just to sum it up, my hopes for Atleti have been pretty low this year, and I just haven't found the light. Honestly, there's no shining light. Like, there's
I've
something.
tried to get some, but man,
you've tried. But I think every weekend you're seeing what I'm talking about, bro.
Yeah.
Game against Lazio. To be completely honest, I thought Lazio played a pretty good game. Not that they dominated us, but honestly, I didn't really see much from Atleti either. Though that doesn't really surprise me because the way we've been playing has been really, really negative, man. We don't really have any specific outlets. Griezmann, for as good as he was last year, I'm not going to say he's lost any sort of his magic, but right now the team's just not meshing. Right, so when Griezmann tries to find Morata, when he tries to find Samuel Lino, when he tries to find Depay when he's healthy, it's not leading to anything. And then when Griezmann tries to receive the ball, for some reason, his touch is a bit heavy. So it's just not working right now for Atletico. It's just not working. We end up taking a pretty surprising lead through Pablo Barrios.
Yes, sir.
A huge deflection, massive deflection. It goes in, I'll take it every day of the week. 1-0. And then, of course, the equalizer comes very, very late in the game.
Insane.
And to be completely honest, I don't think I've ever seen a goalkeeper make as clean of a contact on a goal like that before, bro.
Yeah.
It was pure. Absolutely pure. A beautiful whipping ball from, the one and only Luis Alberto. And it just finds the goalkeeper, Provedel, I believe is his name.
Yeah.
It finds his head perfectly. Pinpoint accuracy. All he really has to do is just look towards goal, and that ball crashes against the back of the net. It's 1-1. Atletico, I don't even think had a shot on target other than the goal that ultimately went in. It was pretty poor display for me offensively. Lazio did enough. I think they deserved the draw. Not that Atletico deserved to lose or deserved the draw, but yeah, I think Atletico are just going to have a lot of labored results here. And this is what it's going to be for the rest of the season for Atletico. So, if you're expecting them to do anything in the Champions League, I would lower those expectations because we really just don't have anything going forward. But for Lazio, maybe there's something there. Ciro Immobile should have had at least one goal, maybe if not two. So if you're Lazio, you have a lot more going for you. You just need your players to be way more efficient, and you could have won this game.
That equalizer was insane.
Insane, dude.
It was insane, and it's crazy being on the receiving end of what is a magical European night, right? Because that was like a moment in history for the Champions League.
Yeah,
and it just so happened to be against Atletico, but taking them out of the equation, focusing solely on Lazio and Provedel, what he was able to do, making a forward-ass run in the box.
Yeah.
Unlike any other keeper I've ever seen in the past. Usually they just happen to be at the right place at the right time and it just catches them. This guy looked for the ball, man. He searched for it and he found it, man. He found it. A beautiful goal. Goes past Oblak. They tie the game. Madness and Lazio. 1-1 draw. But for Atleti, man, something that just kind of dawned upon me was, can you blame Joao for wanting to leave this? Can you truly blame him, bro? Because you're right. This shit's grim, dude.
Yeah,
and if you're a young player trying to make a career, make a name for yourself, granted, it hadn't worked out in the past when he was part of more exciting Atletico teams, but now, I'm scared for like a guy like Pablo Barrios, man. Like, I want him to develop properly. How do you justify, I guess, the current situation for Atletico? Because they do have a responsibility to at least provide some sort of positive environment for these young, talented players that they do have. And so that they can end up developing into really strong stars the way they have in the past. But as of right now, have you seen a low this low for Atletico in a while?
So the way the way I see this is Atletico have been like this for a while. Honestly, we found some sort of luck in the bubble that ultimately did win us the league. And I think it was just mainly down to Llorente had a crazy season, absolutely crazy season that he has been unable and will never replicate. and just defensively, we for some reason just did not make mistakes, right? Yeah. But then, of course, there was also the bubble factor. I do think that played into it. I really do. I'll still take that title. It was a beautiful title. I cried when we won it because any sort of silverware, is very few and far between for Atletico. So it was a beautiful moment. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. But what I'm getting at is that I think Atletico have been on this trajectory low-key for the last 5 years. Yeah. So that's why this doesn't hurt me whatsoever because I went into the season knowing the last 4 seasons. So I see this, it's a new low for Atletico, but it's one that was coming.
But you're not concerned by it? That's my thing as a fan. Do you see this only getting worse, or is there a way back up is my question.
Nah, I don't see a clear way back up, I'll be honest.
No way.
I think the only way Atletico I think the only way Atletico rediscovers that incredible form between like 2013 and 2017, even close. Like even if we get close to that, the only way is if we completely redo the squad. The squad has done what it could and it is now used and used and used and used, that there's no more creativity. There's no more true passion for the way that Simeone likes to play. And when you don't have that, like all you have left is just raw ability on the ball, but you got to have some sort of game plan. You have to have some sort of motivator, and it just is non-existent in this Atleti squad. So we'll always be competitive with this type of squad, but we won't get anywhere near the heights that we once reached. So the only way is if we completely revamp the squad.
Yeah, I hope to see that happen one day, man, because I think football's better when Atletico is an elite team, man. It makes for such entertaining TV. Diego Simeone just going crazy on the sidelines in meaningful games is unlike anything else.
Oh, yeah, man.
So I'm with you, man. I'm trying to provide you that positive energy, but if it's that grim, then it kind of sucks, man. It sucks, and hopefully they get into the Europa League and they have a shot at winning that title then.
Yeah, I've chalked up the 2020s. No more. Atletico's not going to win anything. I'm hoping we'll have a completely new generation by 2030, and maybe we have a good 2030 decade. That's literally what I'm hoping for.
And on a similar note, I've had a couple people DM me because they're interested to see your response. Because over in Barcelona, you got your ex-man, Joao Felix.
Got a goal on his debut at the weekend, not just Champions League, at the weekend.
And Barcelona as a whole scored 5 goals in that game and followed it up by 5 more goals against Antwerp in their first Champions League game this year. Joao Felix with 3 goals and an assist in 2 games. Mm-hmm. Straight up, what's your response to that?
I saw his very first goal against Betis, I believe it was. Brilliantly done. He took it very well, got right in front of the keeper, had a very tight angle, stayed calm, rifled it home. Beautiful finish. Joao Felix with a little nonchalant, like, this is why I came here.
Yeah.
You know?
Spoiled brat, bro. Little brat.
And so I can't deny that. I can't argue it. He's right. He made the right decision.
Made you bite your tongue when you said you saw that ball hit the net.
Yeah, I was like, who was that? I was like, Felix.
Man, bad taste in your mouth watching that.
It really was. It really, really was. But I mean, the skills there. I've always known that, right? I knew that when Felix came, even though he wasn't getting a lot of playing time, I knew that he had something to him. And I said it even when he was leaving Atletico. The one thing about Joao Felix is he has tremendous ability on the ball. I think what didn't work out with Atleti was all the tactics. He just didn't buy into it and therefore refused to play into it, right? It seems like at Barcelona, he really has found his fit. More free-flowing. He gets to basically go wherever he wants. It looks like already the coach has full trust in him to use his skill completely out on the pitch in the creative way that Felix wants to. And I think that's what Joao wanted ultimately, was just true freedom on the pitch to display his artistry. And I think it's working. I think it was the right decision. So for Barcelona, for Xavi, and for Joao Felix, I think they've found a good match for each other. So all I can really say is I'm glad he's playing high-quality football. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if he can keep it up. Because I think at the end of the day, 10 goals against 2 opponents, Barcelona as a whole, one of them being Antwerp, and another one Betis, that once they got that second or third goal, Betis just gave up.
Oh, Betis were terrible.
Yeah,
in that game,
I'm really interested to see if he continues this on, because Felix has done this. It's not like he hasn't done this, where he has a really hot 2 to 4 game streak, and then he just stops, man. And that was my question to you last time that we talked about him, where, you know, he hasn't amassed more than 8 goals in the league for 4 years straight. And we talked about is that what he's capable? Is that like his potential? Is there more to Felix? And you told me that truly you don't think there is. You think that kind of is the max that he can achieve. Is there a possibility here where he might be proving you wrong if he continues this trend with Barcelona?
No, he definitely will, because when you look at the players that he has around him at Barcelona, it's so much more his style. Yeah. There can be moments, 20-minute spans, where he can just rely on the ability of Pedri, Gavi, Rafinha, Ferran Torres to just take the ball and run at the opponents. And then Felix can kind of play off the ball. And then when he wants to get involved, he can then ask for it. At Atleti, the only way Felix was going to do any good for us was if he was on the ball. There really was no chance for him to be effective off the ball. But dude, at Barcelona, when he has so many other players around him that are very ball-oriented at their feet, dude, he can basically play exactly how he wants to. So I easily could see Felix getting 10-plus goals this season just because of the players that are around him.
Yeah, I want to see if he follows through with that. Outside of that, dude, I think Barcelona personally has stood out to me in this first match week, because this is, to me, the best starting lineup they've had in years, probably since Messi last was there. This Barcelona team is playing football that I think is genuinely productive for once, whereas in the past few years, I've always seen it as a little bit limited, a little bit grim, and it's why we saw them flame out of the Champions League and end up going to Europa League and not having really much success in Europe. What they're doing now, I think, has the foundations of really good, really positive football. And to me, it's their depth. They actually ultimately did end up doing really well in the transfer window, only spending 3 million euros, I believe, despite the limitations they had within the league's financial fair play system and within their own finances as well. Getting a bunch of loan deals with Joao Cancelo and Joao Felix as well.
Yeah.
But then, you know, young guys coming up the ranks like Yamal, who's been having an incredible season so far. You got Leva, you got Joao Felix, Rafinha, Gundogan. De Jong's playing really good as well. He stood out to me a lot. Pedri, Gavi, Araujo once he gets back because he's injured right now. Ferran Torres. there's actually a lot of names to this team offensively that I think will really help this team because their defense was never a question. They were so good last year and so stout, only allowing like 15 goals in the league. It was a question of their offense and what kind of system they can have in place in their midfield. What can they do to maximize the players that they have at hand? Right now, Barcelona has started off really, really well, and I want to highlight them because of that, because in terms of what I would ask for them this season, I think they've done almost everything. And so I want to see if they can continue it. I want to see if Felix can continue playing at this high level. If Yamal can keep having these special moments. If Leva can keep up his streak. He's got like 3 goals in the league now. These guys feel awake. They feel ready for the moment. Let's see what they're able to do. I'm not ready to call them contenders just yet, but I am at the very least interested in them, more interested in them than I've ever been in the past like 4 years, honestly.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a great way to put it. This is definitely the most enticing Barca squad I've seen probably since Messi. That's actually a really great way to put it, because my ultimate take is I just need more sample points. I need more data from Barcelona, because when I've seen them play against very defensive teams in La Liga, they've struggled. Obviously, Antwerp were pretty wide open. Yeah. They kind of played into Barcelona, and it really helped Barcelona look really, really good. I just need to see Barcelona play against a higher caliber team. If they can win in a dominant style 2-0 in a Champions League setting against a better team, then I think Barcelona has truly arrived and have returned to the highest European stage. But right now, I really do think it's a little too early. But for sure, this has to be one of the more exciting Barca squads in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do a little PSG Dortmund talk here.
Sure.
PSG Dortmund, because PSG, I think, had such an interesting transfer window. We already talked about it. A French infusion into this team, getting rid of big names such as Neymar, Messi. But even more importantly, in my opinion, letting go of a guy like Verratti, who, in their way, was almost like their Modric. The way that Modric plays such a pivotal role for Real Madrid, I think Verratti was the equivalent for PSG. Almost synonymous with that Parisian logo.
Oh, dude.
And they let him go to go over to Saudi Arabia and continue his football. And one of the biggest takeaways I got from this game where they beat Dortmund 2-0 was the fact that PSG is going completely all in on Vitinha. They're giving this 23-year-old Portuguese kid the keys to their midfield the same way they did with Verratti. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. All I'm saying is I noticed it because this dude is actively making all the big decisions in the midfield. They're looking to him to sling out these balls. They're looking to him to shoot from outside the box. They're looking to him to feed Mbappe in or find a guy like Dembele or Kolo Muani on the wings or in the middle. He's doing so much for them offensively and even in terms of recovering the ball as well.
Oh, yeah.
Where it became clear to me, Vitinha is going to be crucial to their success. Will they be successful with him in the midfield? I don't think they will because I do think he's still not fully ready for that stage and that scene. And then beyond Vitinha, it's clear that their midfield is also going to be Zaire Emery, the 17-year-old Frenchman, and Ugarte. So it's a midfield that I think I wrote down here has an average age of 20 years old now.
Holy shit.
And I although they're very, very talented, it's not enough to compete against the best midfields in Europe. It just isn't for me.
Yeah.
And I see that as an ultimate limitation. Despite the great assets they have offensively, I see it as a limitation to what they can achieve in this tournament.
Yeah, it's so interesting looking at all the comments after this PSG Dortmund game because it's nothing but praise for PSG. It's almost like they won 5-0 or something against Dortmund. Y'all had a cheap penalty against Dortmund, and then you scored one really good goal through Hakimi. I think you would have won the game no matter what because Dortmund just ultimately were not in this match. But I think for as cohesive and more of a team this PSG squad is now, oddly enough, I don't think they're any better or any worse than when they had Neymar and Messi. Like, they almost sacrificed the stardom for a more cohesive team, but by losing all of that talent, they've essentially downgraded. They really have. I mean, Kolo Muani, Dembele are absolute phenoms on the wings, 100%. But have they ever been players to command the teams at their own respective clubs before they came to PSG? The answer is no, right? And that's the problem. And then when you couple that with a very young midfield, this PSG team ultimately cannot compete against Europe's best. I think it'll be a very feisty team. I think they'll definitely get out of this group, honestly. But for PSG to go past like the quarterfinals, I unless they get a really, really favorable draw, I just don't see it. Maybe they prove me wrong and get better and better and better. But yeah, I just see ultimately the same limiting factors that you do with PSG as well. And to talk about Vitinha was fantastic last year. He really was. He was one of the better signings. I would say him and João Palhinha for Fulham, two really good Portuguese midfielders that hit the scene last year. Vitinha was so good. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be a guy that, gets 10 assists a season or anything like that. I think he's going to be very involved offensively, but he likes to do his defensive duties too. So I think Vitinha is the perfect core to build around, but you can't expect him to do what Verratti did, for example. I don't think you can really expect that, even though Vitinha might be very, very good, but he's just very good in his own different way.
Yeah, I agree with that outlook of PSG. There is just that X factor of Mbappe, and that will always be there.
No,
Mr. Champions, he's been incredible in the Champions League. But let's also look at the other side, man. Dortmund. This one actually played out the exact way we predicted. Dortmund is not a good team this year.
Oh, no, dude.
They're not. And I don't see them being able to play up to a team like PSG, even AC Milan or Newcastle, honestly. I see them as getting last place in this group. And I just think it showed. Going to France and not really being able to impose themselves on this lesser PSG squad. They lost too many players. They're going through a mental crisis right now that they're still trying to recover from. And ultimately, although they have enough to compete to be in the top 4 of Germany, for example, I don't think there's enough here to get out of this group. So for Dortmund, I think that's the outlook I'm going to have for them, unless they are able to prove me wrong by getting really important results against Newcastle or AC Milan. Why don't we have some fun, bro? Why don't we talk about the champions? Let's talk about the champions,
City?
bro. Let's talk about City real quick.
Sure.
Just to have a little bit of fun, man.
Against Červena Zvezda, man?
Yeah, man. A 3-1 result where Červena led for a total of 1 minute.
Yeah.
They led for 1 minute. They scored the first goal of the match right before halftime. And then a minute into the second half, Man City scores. And who was it? None other than Julian Alvarez, who got 2 goals in this game, alongside Rodri, who is going through a personal ascension himself. That guy is fucking on a different plane of existence right now, Rodri.
Better and better.
It's
crazy.
ridiculous.
It's crazy.
But I want to just focus in on Julian Alvarez. What is Julian Alvarez? What is he as a player? What is he as a philosophy? What is he within this Man City team? Because I find this guy so interesting. Doesn't get starter minutes, but provides starter numbers. In 8 games that he's actively been a part of, he has 8 goal contributions so far. Having a stellar start to the season, but still can't find consistent minutes because he's playing behind Erling Haaland,
Absolutely.
Right? Potential Ballon d'Or winner. So what truly is Julian Alvarez? Is he a guy that could start on basically any elite team right now outside of Manchester City? Or is that what he ultimately is? A rotational player inside of an elite team. Almost like, for example, like an Isco or like a Marco Asensio when he was on fire for like 4 or 5 years for Real Madrid coming off the bench. What ultimately is Julian Alvarez to you?
Oh, damn, that's a crazy question, man. I see Alvarez as an elite striker. Truly, I think he could start in any team. He could start for Manchester City. And yes, they would lose some goals, but they actually wouldn't lose that much. That's the crazy thing. That's how good he is. We already saw what he did with Argentina at this World Cup, ultimately replacing a guy like Lautaro Martinez because Alvarez just ended up being better. That's how I see it. Julian Alvarez is better than Argentina's next best striker, Lautaro Martinez. What's crazy, though, and I recognized this last year when Alvarez really started to make consistent minutes off the bench. I was like, wow, Alvarez might be the best get out of any of the biggest clubs, man. Because, dude, they got him for cheap from River Plate. And he just went immediately to Manchester City and joined him at a very young age. Yeah. And it worked. Like, it was just immediate success. And that was crazy because when you look at what they tried to do with Gabriel Jesus prior, it didn't fully work. Jesus never quite worked out for Pep Guardiola. Ultimately, Bernardo Silva started as the 9 over Jesus, and that's when Gabriel was like, "Oh, I got to get out of here because I'm just not."
And Sterling,
I'm not here for it, right? Yeah. But that's the thing. Gabriel Jesus went off for Palmeiras in the Brazilian league. Manchester City try and get him at a very young age for somewhat cheap, and they tried to basically grow him into a Manchester City player. Ultimately, it didn't work out, but Alvarez is the success story of it. Go to Argentina, scout a really good player, and groom him to be a perfect Manchester City Premier League caliber striker. And he has completely filled those shoes in, bro. Completely. So you buy big bucks for Erling Haaland, and then also, just by the way, you have Julian Alvarez too.
Incredible
business. It's ridiculous, man.
God.
It's just such good scouting. It's such good just business system that Manchester City have been able to deploy. That's what I see. I see Alvarez as like an experiment gone completely right. Like it's crazy, bro.
Honestly, before being fully realized, because you reminded me of something like, you look at Enzo Fernandez, who Benfica made the purchase of from River Plate, and then from there Chelsea got him for over 100 million. Can you imagine Julian Alvarez's evaluation if Man City were to be interested right now and he played for like a Benfica team?
Right, bro.
It'd be even more than Enzo, I think, man. It's ridiculous what he has completely carved himself into within one of the toughest teams to carve yourself into in the world is Manchester City. And the way he's just fulfilled that role of coming off the bench and being just as clinical as Haaland, but also as much of a playmaker as a guy like Bernardo Silva, as Phil Foden, for example. That's what stands out to me, is that beyond being just a goal scorer, Julian Alvarez has a really good and keen potential when it comes to, handing off a really important assist or just being a part of a build-up, having really good hold-up play as well. All the aspects you would ask out of a complete forward, Julian Alvarez almost has every single one of them carved out before the age of 23 or some shit, man? It's ridiculous. And so I see him as just a crucial centerpiece for the future of Manchester City. And the fact that him and Haaland are just about the same age means that they're just going to have this duo for the rest of time, dude. Because there's no reason to sell him off unless he becomes unhappy with the amount of time that he's playing. That's the only thing I could see coming in between his success and Manchester City.
It is really interesting because I think you described him perfectly, man. He's a secondary striker. He plays right off of a true striker, or can just play the role himself. Or if you really needed to play any other central position, he theoretically could do it. He has all the makings of a perfect number 9, and then some. That's the magic about Julian Alvarez. And I really do wonder, what will his role be as he grows and matures and goes into his prime alongside Erling Haaland? Like, that's actually a really good point that's going to come up in the next couple of years. Like, is Pep going to have to play two strikers up top at a certain point? Or what's going to happen? Is he going to choose to, maybe go to, for example, like Real Madrid and just become a god over there in Spain? Dude, it's such a good question. That's crazy.
Keep an eye on his career. And hey, you just mentioned it, Real Madrid. Since we're on the theme of, kind of these teams showing what we kind of projected for them, Real Madrid could not have had a more 2023-2024 trademark game against Union Berlin. A game in which they shot 32 times total. 7 of them were on goal, had 76% possession, and ultimately ended up relying on Jude Bellingham to score the game-winning goal.
Guess who, baby?
Guess who, bro? This is a team that we have harped on needs a 9 like no other, and a team that we said in order to achieve success without that 9, we'll need Jude Bellingham to step up and almost play that role for them. And look what's happened, bro. Look what's happened this entire season.
What happened.
It's exactly what they are. It's exactly what happened. Real Madrid ended up winning the game in the final minute through a Federico Valverde shot that ended up being deflected and landed at Jude Bellingham's feet. He scores the goal. He's celebrating once again for the third time now in the last final minute of the game.
I know.
A crazy trend and pattern that is developing, but more than anything, I felt so validated watching this game and knowing, watching Union Berlin try to grind out a 0-0 tie and almost pulling it off. God bless their hearts. Almost pulling it off. But Real Madrid just struggling to score offensively, being wasteful in front of goal and just inaccurate, honestly, man. Joselu tried his best, but as we've said before, it isn't enough. Rodrigo, with Vinny's absence, has not been able to step up the way that people have hoped him to. And Bellingham, once again, comes out leading this team and getting 3 points out of the match. AC Milan against Newcastle, a game that ended 0-0. And I'll give you this stat since I came with numbers here. Expected goals for AC Milan, 2.34. Expected goals for Newcastle, 0.18. In my opinion, Newcastle got outplayed, but was still able to come out of this game with a point, surviving San Siro, and Nick Pope being the man of the match as he had an incredible display of saves and overall athleticism. AC Milan was unable to find the back of the net, and we had a 0-0 draw at the San Siro.
Yeah, I was actually really excited about this game in the build-up to it because I was just like, Milan, Newcastle. We already said it in the build-up to the Champions League. No matter who Newcastle face, it'll just be really interesting to see that pair, to see Newcastle and Blank in the UEFA Champions League. So I was really excited. Milan coming off a really big loss at the Milan derby at the hands of Inter, which was honestly completely unexpected. And Newcastle, in their own unexpected way, coming off just overall a lackluster start to the season based off of what everyone thought they were going to do. The thing is, this game was a perfect representation of each team's shortcomings. Yeah. For me, Milan, they really showed that they have so much offensive power. Christian Pulisic, Rafael Leao, Olivier Giroud, Samuel Chukwueze. It's phenomenal offensive line.
I would throw in Theo Hernandez.
Yeah,
the dude basically plays like a winger, dude, at times. It's insane how forward he gets.
Yes. So they have so many avenues to attack any sort of opponent. But there are times for Milan where it just doesn't lead to anything. Whether they get very impatient, maybe they lose a little bit of focus, or they just get a little chaotic and maybe too dramatic where they should just slow it down and try and dominate a team maybe off the pass rather than just throwing a ball over the top or just trying to dribble past players. I think Milan really do get just a little desperate at times. And the only thing I can really say about Milan is that I think that's just inexperience. I mean, when you look at Pulisic, Leao, Chukwueze, they're all pretty young, and they've never really, took the teams that they were at by themselves prior to going to Milan. Giroud, for me, the only true veteran experience. But, Giroud completely relies on service. It's not like he can ask for the ball and change the landscape of their offense. He can't do that. He's not that type of player. So that's what I really saw from Milan. It's just they have a lot going for them, but translating that into results, I think, is their biggest shortcoming, bro. And I relate them to the mid-2010s of Juventus, right? That team, I don't even think they were as razzle-dazzle as this Milan team, but somehow, some way, they always found a way to win. That Juve team back then, they would have won this game at least 1-0. Milan should have done the same thing here. I thought they absolutely outclassed Newcastle, especially in that first half, and I think they should have won this game. I think it's honestly a pretty big miss. Going to Newcastle, man, we could analyze this all day. I don't even know if we've really talked about Newcastle's shortcomings, but it's why I didn't have them. It's why I had them having a worse domestic season this year than last. It all comes down to they did not add to their offensive line in the transfer window. They really didn't, man. You lose a player like St. Maximin, who was pure chaos, and he occupied several defenders when he was on the pitch. And you replace him with Anthony Gordon, who's good, completely unproven, and you replace him with Harvey Barnes, who's also good, but in my opinion, pretty unproven because he was with a relegation team last year at Leicester, even though he had a good season. That's your replacement there on the left wing. And then on the right, bro, you have Miguel Almiron, who is solid, but is he going to get you far? I think the answer is no. And then if it's not Miguel Almiron, it's Jacob Murphy. Once again, a very good player, but is he going to get you past the elite teams in Europe? For me, the answer is no. So while they did get a very good signing in Sandro Tonali and completed the defensive aspect of their midfield, bro, they are lacking in their offensive line. Completely lacking. Callum Wilson had a phenomenal season last year, but it was one that truly I do not think he can replicate. You get Alexander Isak as a good replacement for Wilson, and I think that's good. But as I just outlined on the wings, there is no true replacement in quality, man. And I think that's where they're really lacking, bro. And I think it was also very clear Joelinton's out with an injury, and his absence is heavily felt because you then have Longstaff, Bruno Guimaraes, and Sandro Tonali as your midfield. Zero creativity from an offensive point of view. You can't win a game if you have those three midfielders playing. You have to have Joelinton, and in my opinion, you should have bought another attacking midfielder as his competitor in that attacking midfield position. So, dude, for me, Newcastle are missing a ton of pieces, and it's requiring them to replicate their performances last year, but to replicate them and then to go above that. And I just don't think that's realistic. Yeah,
I can't. With these allegations, I can't deny them. I can't. As wrong as I was about Newcastle, because I was high on them going into the season,
We all were.
you were a little bit more pessimistic about them.
Yeah,
than
I was, but the thing is, I still think they have a good team. It's just when you're talking about cracking the top 4 in the Prem or being good in the UCL, they don't have it.
See, and that's where I think we differ. I thought that they would be able to crack from the top 4, and I thought they'd be able to get out of the group. But for as wrong as I was about them, I was as right about Man U. I think Man U, I got absolutely spot on in their inability to get into the top 4 and what we're seeing so far in the Champions League. So that's why, I'll take it. I was wrong about Newcastle so far. They've done everything to prove me wrong, and they've been absolutely abysmal. And this game just showed it with 0.18 expected goals is basically nothing. They gave nothing.
They gave nothing.
And on the other hand, AC Milan, I do agree. I think there's a true concern with their final third decision making, man. We saw so many times in that game, you'd see like a winger get by a player, and then instead of handing the ball off, just shags it, bro. Not just a bomb of a shot that goes way above the goal and nothing happens. Dude, Rafael Leao at one point got past 3-4 guys and tried to back heel flick, bro.
Yeah, I know.
And completely whiffed it, man. If that doesn't represent final third decision making, then I don't know what will, dude. So many times I saw like Olivier Giroud pissed off that he didn't get the ball. And when he did get it, he'd be selfish and he would just shoot it instead of looking for other options. There's a lack of chemistry that's really weird because in the build-up, it's incredible. They're so good at getting into that final third.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to making a crucial decision that leads to a goal, they don't have it. And it's just a very concerning performance to see following that 5-1 loss to Inter. You wish, as an AC Milan fan, you would see something a little bit productive or positive. I don't think this was it ultimately. So both these teams showing signs of concern. I think for Newcastle, that match that they have against PSG in the Champions League will come down to deciding if they get through or not. And for AC Milan, they got to get it together because I do think they have the talent to finish in the top 2, but they need to figure out their offense if they want to go far in this tournament and be able to replicate what they were able to do last season. Sevilla played against Lens, right? And this is a crazy personal game for me, bro, because we've been following Lens since last year.
Since last year, dude. It's been a full year.
We've only been doing the pod for like 2 years, right? So like in the first full season that we were able to cover football on tape, Lens was one of the first teams that, had like a bit of a magical run in which they finished in second place in the French league and only came like 4 or 5 points short of PSG. Followed them throughout the season, and we saw the heights that they were able to reach with a guy like Fofana in the midfield, who is now gone over in Saudi Arabia, I believe. Or a guy like Openda, who was so good for this team offensively, so much so that he found a way over to RB Leipzig and upgraded clubs this offseason. But, Lens took that hit. They had to find a replacement. And although they spent a little bit of money in the transfer window, Lens is just shaping up to be a type of squad that's going to get ran over in this tournament. At least that's the outlook I had for them going into this game because it's not the same team anymore, bro.
No.
And it truly hurts. This one truly hurts because they didn't stand a chance against the ruthlessness of the transfer market. And it hurts sometimes, man, to see a team, not everyone can be Brighton. Not everyone can be even like a Monaco, who even though they got rated, they were able to be good for a couple more years. Or Leicester, they got rated after they won the Premier League, but they're still able to make quarterfinals of the Champions League. There's still enough there to fiddle with a fun Champions League run. But for Lens, this is brutal, bro. Brutal. And so I almost was scared for them going into this match, even though it's fucking Sevilla. I'm like, man, the Champions League will not be kind to these French people. But what we saw, I think, was actually kind of positive, man.
Sevilla, though, bro.
Well, let me get there. Because I think Sevilla is showing complete and utter commitment to the Europa League. They are 100% ready for the tournament that they truly are waiting for, which is the Europa League. They are 100% geared towards that, the way they play, the way they handle themselves. The crowd wasn't even all fully there because they know that the time hasn't truly arrived for them. They are waiting for those Europa League nights to truly come out full throttle because the Sevilla team is so mediocre, man. I don't like how they play. They got to be one of the most least watchable teams in Europe right now competing in these competitions. And on the other hand, you have Lens, who, for as limited as they were in terms of talent, tried their absolute best. And they went down 1-0 to the Sevilla team off of a crazy Locampos finish off of a corner. And they got back into it tying it 1-1, and then in the final minutes actually having a genuine chance at taking the lead, bro. So I was happy with what Lens was able to do. And if anything, one of the biggest takeaways I had was my boy Samba, the goalkeeper for Lens. This man is going to keep Lens in so many games this year. He's going to be under attack game in, game out. But honestly, whether they get relegated or not comes down to him, because he was massive in this game. Massive. His positioning was questionable on that first goal that he conceded to Sevilla, but after that, he was incredible, man. He was so good, so stout in goal, and you love to see that for a team that's going to be under attack the way that Lens is going to be this season. But outside of that, that's kind of it. My boy Sotoka is still part of this team, still trying his best, and I believe his mid-30s, trying to do something for this squad. And they have their moments of genius, they have their moments of magic, but there's a lack of consistency. There's a lack of talent that I think ultimately will play against them. But the fact that they're able to get a 1-1 draw to Sevilla away from home, with everything I just said, I think it's a win.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you look at Lens, I mean, when was the last time they were in a European competition? I really do wonder.
It's been about 20 years of what I heard them say.
Holy shit.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, well, there you go. Any sort of point, I think, is a huge win, especially on the road. I do just wonder, who else is in the group? Do we know?
Arsenal and PSV.
Oh, Arsenal and PSV are in their group as well with Lens. That PSV, honestly, I'm really curious to see how they match up there.
That's the one.
Because I really want to know, is it the same, or is Dutch football actually better than, not a great but not a bad Lens team? I really do wonder there. Arsenal's going to be nearly impossible. But, I mean, it actually, since Sevilla's not doing good right now, it somehow might be open.
It still might be open.
It actually might be open for Lens. So I'm not going to count them out just yet. So that'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. And lastly, I think a team that needs to be talked about as maybe becoming a contender. All right, I want to be careful here. Just maybe. Is Napoli.
Ah, yes.
What can Napoli do this Champions League season? Starting off against a team that we, funnily enough, have followed.
I know. In
Braga, dude. Playing in Braga to start off. And honestly, I mean, Braga tried their best, man, in this game.
They did.
Ultimately losing 2-1, but in my opinion, they shot themselves in the foot.
Freak own goal, man.
Ridiculous own goal, dude. Ridiculous. And Napoli themselves didn't look that convincing, but I do think there's something to be said about the fact that even though they weren't playing at their absolute best, they were able to come out with 3 points away from home. The context does matter, and an own goal that was wildly ridiculous, I think, matters, but they still got the 3 points. And I do still feel that Napoli is a team that very clearly relies on momentum, dude. Like, this team is so impacted, even on an individual level. Like a guy like Kvaratskhelia. Like, when was the last time you saw a highlight from him, dude? It's actually been he's gone through a little bit of a drought, but I think it's because he's so heavily reliant on the team's chemistry overall. And it goes for every single one of these players. They have the talent to still be able to do something like get to the quarterfinals of this tournament, but they got to find a way to activate that chip of, finding that chemistry that they had at one point that gave them a 20-point lead in the Serie A by December. They need to find that switch in them to be able to fully wake up. But the fact they were able to get 3 points away from home, despite that, I still think means something.
I think they got really lucky. It should have been a draw. In my head, I'm not even considering this as a win. So sure, they got 3 points on paper. I think stylistically they didn't.
No.
And for me, this is completely representative of how Napoli has been this entire start to the season. So oddly enough, I've actually watched every single Napoli game in Serie A. So what we saw against Braga is exactly how they've played in every single Italian game so far this year. And you actually summed it up perfectly. I'll go into slightly more detail. This Napoli side has a lot of talent. That is no question. Lobotka, Zambo Anguissa, Osimhen, even though he's a little off target right now, Kvaratskhelia, even though he's a little off form, they all possess tremendous amount of talent. And it's still there. that same talent that was there last year and got them a Scudetto and got them a deep Champions League run, it's all still here. The only thing they've really lost has been Kim Min-jae, which is huge. It's like losing, your stalwart center back. That is a big miss. And Spalletti, the coach. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that in a second, but the talent is there. What's wrong with Napoli, and it actually might be a bit of the momentum take that you had, they lack definitiveness in the final third and cohesion and chemistry in build-up. It's just not there anymore. And what's crazy is that they were so certain about how they approached games last year.
Yeah.
And now they're the exact opposite. Truly, when you look at how they build when you look at who they look to create, it's way less dynamic. And I mean completely less dynamic for this Napoli side. I think a couple things can be said. Kvaratskhelia is definitely a momentum type player. I think he does need the chemistry around him for him to actually escalate his own level of play. But then beyond that, from a technical perspective, the fullbacks used to get so involved. Mario Rui, Matias Oliveira, and then on the other side, Di Lorenzo, they used to get up and they would do little 1-2s. They would whip in the ball. They would basically get in the midfield at times and just maintain offensive possession for Napoli. And this is where I think the coach has come into play. I think he stopped that. Maybe to try and be more defensive, but I think it's completely crushed Napoli's chemistry offensively. Because now, instead of having those pivots of the right and left fullback to kind of rely on to send in balls or just even maintain possession, now it's all on Politano, Kvaratskhelia, and Osimhen. That's it. So you don't really have any more outlets. It's just up to those top three players to create for Napoli, and it's a labored effort now. And it's just way less creative, nowhere near as dynamic. The talent's there, right? And I think it is why maybe they did get a win here, and it's why they've been able to somewhat get results in Serie A right now. The talent is still there, but man, their direction, their strategy, I think it's off. I think it's really off.
I swear something happened when they lost to AC Milan 4-0, bro.
I was going to say, what's crazy is that this was foreshadowed because after that game, this began.
Yeah, man.
This began after that game.
Something happened, man, because they were a complete shadow of themselves. You're right. They're a complete shadow of themselves now than what they were. I'm thinking about what I saw when Liverpool went and played at Napoli, and Napoli absolutely destroyed them. Man. It's a completely different team. Completely different team. Yeah, Simeone coming off the bench and scoring some really good goals. I think he might have started that game, but I haven't seen the same since. Nah. And with that AC Milan result that finally stopped them in their crazy streak that they were on in Serie A, since that moment, they then went on to disappoint in the Champions League when we thought that they would make the final off of the favorable quarterfinal matchups that they had. Yeah. Ended up not doing that. And then now to start off the season, haven't been the best Italian team that we've been seeing and has been honestly off to a mediocre start in their context. This is weird. It is really weird. And it is a thing that I think comes down to the coaching and also just the cohesion and magic. I guess just that energy that they had just ran its course, bro.
Yeah, it's like
and it really was one of those things,
it's
man.
So weird.
Maradona gave him the touch of luck and they took advantage so they could win the league, but that might end up being it, dude. Yeah. Because I don't know if I see them repeating Serie A this year and going deep in the Champions League. I'm still going to leave room because I think maybe since it is such a thing that's reliant on energy and magic and chemistry, I think there's a way they can tap into it. At least I hope there is. But if they continue playing at this level, then I do agree. They're not going to do anything notable in this tournament. And we're going to see a Napoli side that ends up disappointing after the really good season they had last year. Last game, and this one I just want to quickly note. Galatasaray is in the Champions League now.
Yeah.
Right? Turkish side facing off against Copenhagen. Danish side to start off in the first match week. They tied 2-2. After Copenhagen actually went up 2-0, red card, Galatasaray gets back into the game in the final 10 minutes, but their team is insane. When we look at these, let me give you these names. Let me just give you these names.
I didn't see this game.
Objectively, think about this. Galatasaray was wildly active in the transfer window, so much so that I took a note of it early on. I was like, what the hell is going on over there? So to start off, they got Wilfried Zaha from Crystal Palace.
That's right. Okay. I was aware of that one.
Which we'll talk about him in a second because I got a whole thing about him. They got Mauro Icardi, right? The Argentine, joining this team.
Why not?
Davinson Sanchez from Tottenham, joining the squad as well. Angelino, Demirbay from Bayer Leverkusen. Ndombele, Dries Mertens. Some random-ass players.
Okay.
Hakim Ziyech. Tete, who was at Leicester at one point. They got Ziyech.
Bro, I did not know
ended up going there, man.
Holy shit.
After that whole Chelsea saga, he ends up going to Galatasaray.
Oh, wow, okay.
They got Lucas Torreira, right? Who at one point played for Arsenal. Has fallen off, but maybe he's Turkish level.
Sure.
And then, of course, they have Muslera, who I only listed because he's a notable name, right? 36 years old, 37 years old, still playing for them. That's about, 9, 10 just names, right? Because when we look at Turkish squads, sometimes they'll have 4 or 5 really notable guys, but then the rest of them are just, no names, bro. Galatasaray has a good amount to the point where it stood out to me and I had to say something about it. Did they show it on the pitch this past week? I don't think so, man. They didn't play up to that level. Copenhagen, low-key, outclassed them in my opinion, and they got lucky that they got a red card and that eventually the game opened up. But more specifically, man, I was thinking about this because I saw a whole argument between a Crystal Palace fan and a Galatasaray fan.
Oh shit!
Where we're discussing Zaha and how he ultimately ended up choosing Galatasaray as a destination because they get Champions League football. Now, the Crystal Palace fan argued that what's the point of playing Champions League football if you're probably destined to flame out after the group stage? Is 6 games in the Champions League worth more than playing in the Premier League for a mid-table side like Crystal Palace? What do you think? Do you think ultimately Zaha was right to pursue this venture in a league that's much lesser than the Premier League but still ends up getting Champions League minutes and moments? Or should he have stayed at Crystal Palace and tried to continue that run at finishing beyond 10th place?
What's interesting with Zaha is that I think the answer for him specifically is clear because he did the Premier League career. He did it for a long time. So he knows what would have happened, and he's already experienced the Premier League to its fullest. So he had the opportunity to leave, and I think it was the right one because, dude, he was born and raised in the Prem. So why not try and experience something a little bit different? I truly see it as the same thing as Harry Kane leaving.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, obviously it's a lot different because Kane will probably go on to win silverware, whereas Zaha, well, actually he might at the Turkish League. Who knows? And so if Zaha had left when he was like 23 to go to Galatasaray, maybe I'd be saying something a little bit different. But the fact that he went when he was like, 30? Mm-hmm. I'm completely fine with it.
Mm-hmm. So fuck that Crystal Palace fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Because dude, he gave so many years to Crystal Palace.
I think I agree.
Many, man.
I agree, man. Even if you're not gonna make it to the knockout stage, it's like to get he's earned it. Zaha specifically.
He's earned
it. A Champions League night. He deserves it. And over getting mid-table with Crystal Palace, bro. I think he's done his duty. He's shown his loyalty to the club. Get him into his European nights, and we saw it, man, providing a crazy assist for that second game-tying goal.
Oh, nice. And another thing is that even if you're destined to get out of that group stage, what if you're like a point away from second place? You know, what if you can just get out and then you crash out in the round of 16? Like, that's just still be amazing to play a knockout round in the Champions League, man. Yeah. I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I think so too.